Out of all the characters in the Kengan Omega story, there is really only one character that Shen Wulong himself considers a monster, and that is his very first clone, Shen Luohan. There is no other character that is more like Wulong than Luohan himself, and there is no one in the story who has more of a chance of defeating Shen Wulong and the drive to completely dethrone him than Luohan. The hatred between these two characters straight up might surpass even their own existences as people. And I'm going to talk about why this is all the case. Why Luohan should be taken a lot more seriously as the man that might turn out to be the new god of the verse. And ultimately, this is all Shen Wulong's fault. And I'll start off with why I say that. The main reason being, Luohan had no plan to actually take out Shen Wulong before Shen Wulong slapped him across the parking lot. And the evidence for this should be pretty obvious, because from that point he went to talk to Oma and Ryuki, then he talked to Nico, then whatever plan he cooked up, no, something else completely different happened in terms of how he ended up getting Shen Wulong's techniques. But all this just goes to show that Luohan is improvising more than anything. And so this rebellion may have just been a thought for Luohan, may have just been a feeling because he's always hated Wulong, right? But it is that incident that, by the way, he's completely innocent in that entire situation. There is no logical reason, barring the use of a theory, which I'll discuss later on in the video, that can justify Wulong actually slapping Luohan like that. But it's important that Shen Wulong is the guy that pushes Luohan to do this, because it gives Luohan a narrative justification for his actions, which gives him, plot-wise, an advantage over Wulong. But there's something more important that might give him an even greater standing in the narrative, and that is Luohan's identity. Because he is actually different from Oma, who is the clone of Tiger, and Ryuki, who is the clone of Wulong, the dragon himself. Previously, whenever I discussed Luohan, I always thought that he would be a part of the Tiger lineage or cloning process, or just clone. And the reason I thought that was mainly because I always thought of Tiger as the far more chaotic, darker version of Wulong. But that doesn't really make sense. And that is because Wulong himself has said that, well, Luohan is neither him nor Tiger. But he has to be a part of Wulong, mainly because of what happened with Joji. And this is very important because now I'm going to start talking about the theory part of this. I did a video a while back where I talked about understanding Shen Wulong, and this was before the revelation of Tiger and Wulong. In fact, it was the week of that chapter coming out. But that entire scenario to do with Joji, whenever I looked at that scenario, I always said it never made sense from a logical perspective, because Luohan never did anything or even threatened Joji. The person who comes close to doing that is Wulong himself, when his speech bubble goes black and he says, "What are you gonna do? Come at me?" And to me, that's been one of my strongest data points for there being more than one connector. Now, I went a step too far, it seems, because I said it was every generation of the connector that ever existed. But with the recent revelation in mind, I think it's safe to say that Shen Wulong is keeping another secret, and that is the fact that there is a third connector. And this is probably the actual connector. And the reason I say that is because Wulong has claimed that he isn't really the leader of the worms. So he doesn't really identify with the Worm Alliance or the Worm Organization. The issue is that that directly conflicts against what we saw in a flashback during or right before the fight between Ryuki and Adam Dudley. In that flashback, we see what I can only think of as the spirit of the connector after the worm has been defeated by Metsudo and Uryo. The last surviving worm member dies and he's like, for the connector, draw something on the ground, and then the spirit of Wulong pops up. When this happens, that version of the connector says that Uryo and Metsudo defeated him. That's very important. In that chapter, the connector identifies himself and what the worm was doing with what he is doing. There's unity there. He's the leader in that flashback, and that directly conflicts with what Shen Wulong has said. But there's always the possibility that Wulong is completely telling the truth, and that either Tiger, or I'm going to say really the original connector, is the one truly pulling the strings. And so, if all of what I'm saying is true, then that really does change things for how we see Luohan. Because technically speaking, he is merely trying to reclaim what is rightfully his. Wulong is the anomaly here. And we do know that Gaio Mukaku's father, as I talked about in my Nemesis theory, Gaio Mukaku's father warned the previous connector about doing this cloning project. He was even willing to go up against the connector and risk death because Wulong, or the connector, had actually just straight up stepped outside the natural order, which has currently created this entire mess. But that also leaves the possibility of, if Luohan is actually the original connector and Wulong and Tiger are basically the universe punishing the connector for what he has done, then there's a gap for Luohan to be defeated, because he deserves to be defeated because of what the previous connector had done. But if instead he is the anomaly, then of course he gains an even bigger advantage, assuming my theory on him being the original connector is wrong and he is just a different version, or an RNG clone that really isn't directly related to the original connector at all. If that's the case, that would actually give him an advantage, because there is a narrative consequence at play here that's very important in regards to Shen Wulong, Luohan, Oma, and Ryuki. But either way, Luohan will rise to power and he will be probably one of the strongest characters in this series, undeniably. He is currently learning all of Shen Wulong's techniques, and that will make him incredibly powerful. Wulong himself has admitted as much, that he would be very close to him. It's just a matter of whether or not Luohan can actually defeat Wulong. However, we are not done, because Luohan's little plan of rebellion might not be over, because again, he has said that he's wanted to fight a little dirty, not exactly fair. And every time Nico has asked Luohan, hey, do you think you can win? First he told him that, well, he has pretty good odds. But the second time around, he's pretty silent. But if Luohan's plan is still in motion, it could be that Luohan might actually have another trick up his sleeve. And that might actually be being the representative to fight against the connector for the Kengan Association. And if we're going with a gauntlet type of run, he could be a secret participant, bringing down Shen Wulong once and for all. But yeah, that is the video. Don't forget to like and sub, and until next time, take it easy.